Although I had been exploring some other options for today, as circumstances played out this past week in my family and the hospitalization and ultimate passing away of my brother-in-law, I found myself being drawn to that familiar 23rd Psalm. As I read it and looked over it again, I ended up finding something that I put together many years ago. Apparently, I just shared this one time a long time ago, and I just came to feel like the Lord wanted me to share it with you this morning. And this may be one of those cases where this is more for me than for anyone else, that I need to be reminded of these truths. But I believe we all do at times. Now, I warn you that this is a little different. I don't think I would even call it a sermon. I would call it more of a story or an extended parable based on Psalm 23, but also including some elements from some things Jesus said about sheep and shepherds, especially where he talked about himself as being the good shepherd and us being his sheep. But let's begin by reading this psalm, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. There are certain movies that I try to watch every year around Christmas. One of those, It's a Wonderful Life, that we did a series of messages on back just a month or two ago. But another one of those is the classic Miracle on 34th Street. Is everyone here familiar with that movie? One of the memorable scenes in it is when Kris Kringle is trying to teach the little girl, played by Natalie Wood, how to pretend and how to use her imagination, because her mother had raised her by emphasizing the need to face reality and be logical and use common sense, without balancing those good concepts, because those are some good concepts, but she did it without balancing those good concepts out with the ideas of also being creative and imaginative. So after much work, Kris Kringle is finally able to get the little girl to pretend she's a monkey. So with an ape-like expression on her face, she goes hopping around and chattering like a monkey. So I'm going to ask you to use your imagination a little bit today. Not to pretend that you're a monkey, but rather to pretend that you're a sheep. Now, no, you don't need to make sheep noises and go wandering around like sheep have a tendency to wander. But let's try to look at this psalm from the point of view of a sheep. I mean, that's actually the way the psalm is written anyway. So try to follow along with the story as I share it with you, looking not only at what it says about sheep and shepherds, but primarily what it suggests about us and about our relationship with the Lord. You know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, I hope this word picture that we're trying to draw today might be more helpful to us this morning than maybe a bunch of exhortations from a sermon. So here we go. I'm a sheep, and that's my shepherd over there. I know he's my shepherd. I recognize his voice when he calls out to me. And he even calls me by name. He knows exactly who I am. I know that I belong to him, and in a sense, he belongs to me. He's my shepherd. And I'm so glad and so thankful that he's the one who is my shepherd, because it's obvious that he cares about me. I'd even go farther than that and say that he loves me. He loves all the sheep. And I don't believe there's anything that he wouldn't do for us sheep. I've seen him put his life on the line for his sheep. And not just for the whole flock, but for individual sheep. I mean, one time when I wandered off from the group, a lion ran out of the woods and was going to pounce on me. But the shepherd risked his life and saved me. He risked his life for me, and he defeated that old roaring lion. I'm glad he's my shepherd. You know, there are others who pretend to be shepherds, but they don't really care about us. They care more about themselves. They run off at the first sign of danger. They quit when things get hard. But not my shepherd. Not once has he ever let me down or failed to be there when I needed him. I sure don't deserve a shepherd like him, but I'm so glad that he took me in. The Lord is my shepherd. And with my shepherd being who he is, I know that I'll never lack anything that I truly need. Now, I'm not saying that I don't ever get hungry, but you can tell from looking at me that I haven't exactly had to starve. But it seems that the shepherd knows what I need. And when I start feeling hungry, he lets us eat. And sometimes I get thirsty too. One time I was so thirsty, but just when I thought I couldn't go any farther and I was about to die, my shepherd brought us to the cool water to drink. Now, I don't understand why he does it that way sometimes, but I trust him to know what's best. And I can say he has always provided for my needs. And although he gives me what I truly need, I have to tell you that I haven't always gotten everything I wanted. And just yesterday, I wanted to graze in the pasture longer and to eat more. But the shepherd made us go on into the fold and into the shelter there. And I wasn't too happy about it. I'll admit I made a lot of noise and even directed some of it toward my shepherd. But maybe it had something to do with that bad storm that came up just a few minutes later. I wonder if my shepherd saw that storm coming. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Sometimes the shepherd encourages me to do things that I wouldn't normally do. I mean, I'm a fairly energetic sheep, and I like to run and wander around with my friends and family. I guess I'm the type of sheep that would just keep going till I was worn out. But the shepherd makes me take a break almost every day. He encourages me to lie down in the pasture for a while or beside one of our watering places. And I'm tempted not to. There are always plenty of other things pulling at me to do. But I found that if I do as the shepherd leads, if I stop and lie down in that pasture for a while or beside those still waters, it really refreshes me, especially to lie there in that soft grass and listen to the tender voice of my shepherd as he quietly talks to us or sings to us or just plays a little music for us. And we're right there where we can nibble on a little grass or get a little drink of water if we need it and get the nourishment and refreshment that we need. It's kind of a special time that makes me feel especially close to the shepherd and even closer to the other sheep around me. I'm glad that he makes me lie in those green pastures and leads us beside those still waters. Those times restore my soul. And my shepherd really knows what he's doing and where he's going. He always leads us along good paths. Now, I'll admit, I don't always follow his leadership. I know that I should. I know he's leading down a good pathway. But sometimes something catches my eye. You know, what looks like a good tasting patch of grass over in the distance somewhere. Or I hear a strange noise off to the side. Or I see some other pathway that just looks so inviting. Or sometimes I just get a little curious about those other ways. And before I know it, I've wandered off a little. Well, I've learned my lesson, and I don't do it nearly as much as I used to. I remember one time when I decided to take a different path than the one the shepherd was leading us down. And I didn't get far down that path at all, for I got all tangled up in a thorn bush. When it got all tangled up in my wool, and I was stuck. And oh, it hurt when I tried to move and to free myself. But there was nothing I could do. Nothing except make a lot of noise and call for my shepherd, hoping that he would hear me and find me. And it wasn't long before he came. I mean, it seemed almost like he already knew I was gone and had been looking for me. But when he came, I could hardly look at him. I could see the disappointment in his eyes. But he didn't beat me with his rod. He just tenderly pulled and tugged at my wool and at those thorns. He even had to cut a little bit of my wool to get me loose. I don't think my nice wool quite ever looked the same again. But he got me free and carried me back over to the flock. Do you know, he left all those other sheep in order to come find me. And it made me realize how important I am to him and how much he really cares about me. It makes me want to not ever wander away again. And why should I? The paths he leads us along are always good paths. They're not always easy paths, but they're good paths. They're the paths that take us to our good pastures, the paths that lead us to the best watering holes, and they're the paths that always lead us toward home. Sometimes they don't seem like the best paths, and I feel like I'm lost. But if I keep following, sooner or later, I see that they are the best, and that my shepherd knew where he was leading us all the time. He never gets lost. He never takes us down a wrong turn. And I found that if I get right up toward the front, the closer I stay to the shepherd, the less likely I am to wander off and to get lost. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. There have been a few times when the shepherd has led us through some pretty scary looking places. I remember one valley in particular. It was late in the day, the wind was blowing, and those moving trees were making all kinds of frightful shadows on our paths. Some of the sheep were getting spooked. Some thought that they saw wolves in the shadows, and maybe they did. All I know is that the shepherd pulled us all up real close to him. He even picked up and carried one of the young sheep. But it was strange. I wasn't really scared. There may have been unknown dangers lurking around, and I was tempted to be afraid. But then I looked up and saw the shepherd right there at my side, and I was comforted. My shepherd was with me. He had his rod and his staff in his hand to pull us up close to him and to beat off any attacks by any enemies. And my shepherd is a big, tough guy. He's no wimp. No, I've seen him beat back lions and wolves. I don't think there's any creature that could get past him. I don't think there's any way any enemy of mine could get to me as long as I stayed there close to the shepherd. Now, if I wandered off, I guess that's a different story. But with the shepherd beside me, I know I'm safe. I know that no matter what happens, one way or another, I'm going to make it to my destination. I'm going to make it home. So whenever we travel through some rough and scary places, I always look up at my shepherd and remind myself that it'll be all right as long as he's with me. You know, my shepherd must be a pretty important guy. I've seen him spread a great table of food before guests. They too seem to find safety and comfort in his presence. There's always an abundance of things to eat and drink. When the feast is over, there's always plenty of food, so sometimes the shepherd will feed us from that same table. He must be rich. Seems like he has so much and so much that he wants to do for others and to give to others if they'll only receive it. Oh, and I haven't told you about the sheepdogs yet, have I? One of them is named Goodness, and the other one is named Mercy. And you know what they do? They follow me wherever I go. They're never far away. Sometimes I tend to lose sight of them, but then I hear their bark or I see them run by, and I know that they're there and they have been there all the time. I don't know that I could get away from those dogs even if I tried. And why should I want to? Because they're some of the best friends a sheep could have. I don't know how old those dogs are, but ever since I can remember, they've been there. And I've got a feeling that old goodness and mercy are going to be around all the days of my life. And all my life I want to spend right here in this fold with this shepherd. And I'll be able to. How do I know? Because the shepherd has told us so. He calls us his family. And he says that as long as we want to be there, we can be. He wants us to live with him forever and ever. And that's what this sheep plans on doing. So how about you this morning? Have you come into his fold through faith? Do you know the Lord is your shepherd? Are you following his leadership, feasting on his riches, and living in his presence? You can. Just enter the door through faith in Jesus Christ and keep following your shepherd.